I have designed a life that's different than the one that says just make money and I'll be okay. Because I was like, okay, well, clearly I don't have money. So, what are my actual values? So I kind of stood back and said, like, how can I live by my values? How can I curate my life based on what I actually need out of life? So I was like, okay, I'm a millennial. I grew up in this capitalist hellscape, late stage capitalism, and uh, you know, by my late 20s was at a place that a lot of people are, which was completely burning myself out in order to have enough money. I'm from Southern California, and the cost of living is really high there. I grew up in a place where housing prices are not accessible and never were. And so it was funny for me to grow up in California knowing that I would never own a house, and then moving to Portland and hearing the millennials here just barely complaining about that. And I was like, oh, I've always known that I won't own a house. And generally just always feeling like no matter how much money I make, I never have enough. Is this some psychological problem that I have? Do I not understand how to save money well enough? Do I have to completely make myself unhappy and not have the joys of life in order to save enough money? And I kind of endeavored towards the end of my 20s to have a professional job. I had never gone to college, which I'm really grateful for. A lot of millennials my age went to college, and the only reason that I didn't is I had a lot of addiction problems when I was 18 and would have been going to college, and I just sort of never went back. So I worked in restaurants for a period of time. I decided to go into medical. I was a phlebotomist for a few years. And then I decided to go back to school and get a business degree. And I never finished that degree. And I just sort of ended up working in marketing. And I started being a consultant for marketing, which is the job that I've made the most money at. I could also work remotely, so there were a lot of perks to it. But I just realized doing that work that because I super enjoyed it at first, I realized that no matter what work I was doing, I would always sort of get burned out. That I would never find what was perfect for me to work 40 hours a week at. And I don't know if there are other people who can work 40 hours a week and feel like they're okay. But I never felt okay working that many hours a week. And also, I had times where I was working like 20 or 30 hours a week and then going to school. I know people who work 40 hours a week and go to school. I never felt okay doing that. And I came to the understanding like, I think I actually need to work like half that amount of time in order to be okay. And that is not the standard of the society that I live in. So, fast forward 2020 or so, the marketing consulting business actually got better in 2020 because a lot of businesses that had brick and mortar were pushed online. So, my business got more busy during that time, and I endeavored to like burn myself out even more and make more money and try to sock away money and try to be more and more okay. I felt like I've always felt like our culture taught me to try to make more and more money. So entered a really abusive relationship at that time, decided to do all kinds of things for him financially that were really bad decisions. And I look back on that and I realize how much he was involved in manipulating me into making those decisions. But at the end of the day, I chose to make them. And I have autonomy over my decisions. And so realizing that that was a really bad decision. And so, by the end of that, I had borrowed a bunch of money. I was in $70,000 worth of credit card debt. I bought a house that I didn't want. There was like the stars aligned. Like a family member was willing to lend me the money for the down payment. And, I had a hyperfixation with plants at the time. And like overall, the farm lifestyle, it does vibe with me. I am a homesteader at heart, but this was not the right way to do it. this was about a narcissistic relationship in which I was trying to buy someone's love with stuff. And I realized almost as soon as I bought that house that it was a bad idea and that we were going to break up and that I didn't know how to financially get myself out of this. So uh, I am still digging myself out of the financial hole. So $70,000 in credit card debt. Obviously, the mortgage debt, house will go into foreclosure eventually. $50,000 in debt to the IRS because all of my money was self-employed income, and I made over $100,000 a year working my ass off, burning myself out. And I can tell you today that I have nothing to show for it. And a lot of it was, the bad decisions that I made. But I can tell you that no matter how much money I've made, it has never made me feel okay. It has never made me feel safe and secure. And so, what I learned from this experience is ultimately that trying to make money was not going to be an enjoyable experience, a lasting experience, and like a life plan for me. And I think a lot of people's life plan is like, oh, I'll just make money. Like, I'll just have a career and then that will be my life. So, I have designed a life that's different than the one that says just make money and I'll be okay. Because I was like, okay, well, clearly I don't have money. So, what are my actual values? So I kind of stood back and said, like, how can I live by my values? How can I curate my life based on what I actually need out of life? So I was like, okay, I think in like 40 or 50 years, the environment is going to be like climate change. I think the environment is going to be like pretty bad. I think I can pretty much guesstimate that the environment is going to be the best that it ever will be in my lifetime today. So clearly, I understand that a lot of my experiences are going to be front loaded to the when I'm in my younger years. When I'm older, probably everything will be worse. I think we're probably going to go through a revolution within, while I'm still young. Who knows? The government may just get worse and worse. There needs to be huge reforms. And I think that our capitalistic system is set up to be extractionary. And I think that it just extracts more and more wealth from the population over time. And so that's kind of my view of the future. What would I do now in order to build more structure for myself, knowing that that's kind of what I think is going to happen? So, what kind of goes along with that value and the value of like front loading experiences now is I moved into a community house, and you could probably hear it behind me. There are people in the kitchen. Um, I live with 6 people in Northeast Portland. Not every intentional community is on a farm. I wanted to be urban because I don't have a car. So one of the things I got rid of was my car. And now that I live in Northeast Portland, I can get away, get all around in buses, which is really nice. Most cities don't have that. Portland is already set up well for community, and that's one of the aspects. Another aspect is just people are more community minded. There's really strong buy nothing groups, really strong like anti-capitalist culture here, and a lot of herbalism and a lot of other stuff that I really like. So I don't have a car payment. I am not saving for retirement. I choose to go on trips when I can. I am mostly not saving any money. Like, I have the money that I have to save for taxes because I still have self-employed income. So I'm like, okay, I'm going to pay my taxes like each year, but I don't see myself acquiring many assets. Another one of the reasons is like, I think our currency is pretty unstable. And I'm not a conspiracy theorist, but I'm like, yeah, people, what happens with the stock market and like the meme stocks and things going like wildly up and down in my lifetime. It seems like the stock market is mostly derivative based, and it feels very like 1929 energy. So I think that there could be a huge change in currency. And that's a big reason why it doesn't just make a lot of sense for me to hold on to a lot of money. If I wanted to make more money, I could in the future. And that kind of goes along with the idea of never retiring either. I was interested to learn that Americans only developed this idea of retirement since World War II ish, New Deal ish times. Previous to that, nobody retired. And in most countries around the world, people don't retire either because they're not rich countries. And what do you do when your country is becoming not a rich country anymore, or like devolving essentially? Hate the idea that devolution would have to do with money, but returning to indigenous culture, maybe you could say. That's what other countries do, is they don't retire, but they have strong social systems. They have strong family systems that take care of each other. So how can we better follow the model? How can I better follow the model of people who live without a lot of money? There's also this concept in sociology, the 4 kinds of capital, and I'm not going to remember the fourth. I might not remember the 4th kind. So there's money capital, there's time capital, there's social capital, and then there's intellectual capital. I did remember all of them. So intellectual capital, what I know, nobody can take away the information that I know. That's why they will not let you discharge your college loans in bankruptcy, because no one can take that asset away from you, which is knowledge. So you can get knowledge for free. Thank God we have the internet. You just have to get it from a trusted source, a good source, rather than someone who doesn't know what they're actually saying. So good discernment skills are also part of knowledge. So I kind of look at the other types of capital and see how I can utilize them. Poor people, people with no money, have always utilized intellectual capital. Okay, I'm doing the rest of this with a different microphone because I had to plug my phone in, which is the folly of using a Bluetooth microphone. Anyway, poor people have always used time capital. They've always used intellectual capital. A combination of time capital and intellectual capital is why you can save money on groceries by not buying prepared foods. So obviously there's nothing new about this, it's just a new way of describing it. And as you can kind of hear by the acoustics behind me, I don't know how much you can hear other people talking in the other room. Intentional community is not perfect, and you have to gain skills in order to make it happen. And what I've started to see through this process is, number one, how much happier I am, how much more capable I am of things that I was not capable of before, because I have support, and types of support that I didn't have with friendships. So I could go on such a long tangent about this. Somebody makes me dinner every night. I only make dinner once a week. How many grown women in the US can say that they only have to make dinner once a week and they still get to eat home-cooked meals 7 nights a week? A lot of the people who live in my house have really cool baking skills, just because we're people who like to gain those skills. We like to learn how to bake bread and stuff, where a lot of other people are busy and they don't take the time to learn those things. So it feels very much like returning to some sort of indigenous wisdom that knows the best way for humans to live. But we live in a very urban environment, so it's such an interesting mix. We live right next to food trucks. If we want to have tacos for lunch, we can, or we can, have leftovers. There's a lot of communication skills and skills with directness and skills with conflict that I've had to learn, and I could make a whole video about that too. People say, oh, I could never live in community because I need my alone time. I get plenty of alone time. I can close my door if I want. There's some things that I have to take part in weekly, and I also have my own chores to do here. But it feels so much like living in some of the institutions that I lived in growing up and really loved. And maybe that's why I love intentional community. I grew up going to boarding school, and then I was also in rehab and also a mental hospital. And all of those institutions, I always loved them. And part of it is because there was so much structure in my life, and there was so much community and togetherness. And this feels very similar. We've had to create our own structure here and our own values, and we regularly go over them. And I feel like we have a really healthy sense of democracy in this house. I feel like everyone's voice is heard and everyone is equally respected in a way that I just don't feel in the rest of our society. So I live very cheaply. My grocery bill went from like $1,300 a month for 3 people to $150 a month for 1 person. And we share our grocery bill here. I still have my wiener dog. My room is really small, but our house has a lot of communal space, so I tend to put all my books in the house if I'm okay with sharing them, and the books that I don't want to go missing, they are in here. But there's just a lot of things that, like I've taken on more possessions here than I ever have in my life, because part of the legacy of being a millennial is like you move every year. And I think a lot of that was my mental health, that I didn't have enough mental stability to not move every year. Like I always felt like I needed to move and get out of here, and that was one of the ways that I would emotionally regulate. It's like, I gotta get out of here. I gotta have new surroundings. And as I've done more of my emotional work, I've been able to stay more in one place. But I definitely think the moving had to do with budget too, with being able to have enough money. And I see so many millennials out there struggling and working themselves to the bone to barely have enough. And I think that if we honestly appraised what our values were, like, not only is socializing a value, but it's something that provides. Like, it's a value that I hold very high in my life, and it's something that provides mental health for me. I feel like I said this we have a Zoom group that we do weekly now, and it's just with people from the internet who discover the Zoom group. I said in our Zoom group last week, I feel like the US, like the American culture, told me, just figure out how to have money, just figure out how to have a good job, go to college, etc., and everything else will work itself out. And the truth has been that money has seemed to always take care of itself. And what I really needed to gain the skills in is how to connect with other human beings, to network, to have social skills, to create community foundations, and also relationship foundations, learning how to have friendships and close romantic partners. That's been an important part of like my safety net. And there's also self-trust in there that I've gained like in my emotional process, like learning how to trust myself more and know that I will be okay to take care of myself. But it was really important for me to recognize that the expectation on me as an autistic person to function in a 40-hour-a-week job was not going to be the vibe. It was never going to make me happy. In fact, the time that I was able to make the most money, I was the most burnt out. And I think that I probably could work more than I do now, but I don't want to. I work 5 hours a day, 3 days a week at a coffee shop as a barista. And all my other income is from tarot card readings, and I get some money from social media, content creation. I've been making TikTok videos for about 3 years. I just recently started making YouTube videos. And I have ambition to write. I have a very leisurely life. I spend a lot of time sleeping. I spend a lot of time in my garden, and that is by design. I want to spend most of my life in leisure. And I think the idea that I need to spend the next 50 years working in order to get the last 20 years of my life to be leisure, I don't even know if I'm going to get those 20 years. We don't even know if we're going to get those 20 years for our environment. And so I'm kind of doing it in reverse. And who knows, maybe it's a terrible plan. Maybe by the time I get to 60, I'll be tired of working and I will wish that I saved for retirement. But the way that everybody told me to do it before didn't work for me. And I can tell you, I am so much happier today. And also the idea of sacrificing yourself for the future, like suffering now in a job so that you can have some promised land at the end of it, feels very Protestant ethic to me. It feels like suffer now here on earth and you'll get to go to heaven one day. And I just don't ascribe to that. I do have my own spirituality, but it is not Christian modeled. And what else can I tell you about my life? Yeah, so I live very cheaply. I make $2,500 a month. I don't have a car. I ride the bus everywhere. I grow a lot of food. We're trying to grow more and more of our own food. And eventually I think that I will move back onto a farm. But it'll be in a community land trust. I will never own property again by myself. Oh, I also wanted to say, in my process of getting all my debt cleared away, so bankruptcy and getting it cleared away with the IRS, my experience has been that they require the money of you based on your ability to pay. So I never realized that I was telling like the government and the powers that be that I had the ability to pay by working myself to death, by saying, this is my ability. And what I'm realizing now is, oh, that's not my ability. That would be a superhuman capability for me, unsustainable. I actually have to draw it back to where my actual capability is. And when I work from there, my actual capability is pretty low, and they only judge my repayment by my ability to pay. So now I've been working as a barista for 6 months, and I'm like, oh, okay, I make like $2,500 a month. And they're like, oh, okay, to us, you're poor. And I'm like, okay, interesting. So I'm only required to pay back what poor people earn? And they're like, yeah, unless you made more money. I always thought that somebody would come and like take me to jail. And it's not like that. They kind of look at your assets and they go, huh, you have nothing and you make no money. That's really sad for you. All your debts will be wiped away. Now, if it wasn't credit card debt, if it was actually student loan debt, I wouldn't be able to wipe it away. I have no idea what they do to people when they can't pay and they make no money. Maybe they garnish their wages. We should get a collective together of people to stop paying their college student loans. Because I don't think they would do anything to anyone. That's my guess. They haven't done anything to me. So I've filed for bankruptcy, and I will be filing for relief from the IRS, and we'll see how that goes. So far, the process has been proved to us that you are actually poor. And what I've been told by the lawyer is that they really don't go after you if you're not some rich person that's trying to hide that they have money. So anyway, what I'm saying, millennials, is work at your capability level, because if you work above your capability level, you will have to pay for it. What I'm also saying is the evidence that I have is the powers that be don't seem to be able to bother you unless you have acquired assets or retained assets. And that kind of goes back to my idea of like, I don't think that I want to keep a lot of money around in my life just because I think that the currency is unstable. And I think that's really the only way that I could ever be penalized is financially. We don't have debtors' prisons. We don't have like any punitive measure against people for debt. And I think that the way that millennials but really all people have been forced to live in this financially violent, structurally violent capitalistic system, it's essentially pushing us into debt. Pretty much all the time. I think everyone is hiding that they are in debt. or they are working their asses off and have completely no time. And I think it's really not smart for us to continue to do that. I think that we should all stop working so hard. There is, I don't know exactly where this comes from, but it's something that's always been in my mind. I know that I didn't make it up, but it's like the more that you play into this system, the more that you will help the owners of capital uphold the system. So I see this with people who, want to get into the housing market that are locked out of housing. They believe in housing for all and for affordable housing, and yet once they own a house, they have a stake in that house maintaining its value. And so what I see as, I guess, a revolutionary, as an activist, is it does not make sense for me to play into these systems. I do not want to have a financial stake in this, not because I don't think that it would be possibly valuable, but that I need to do the work of tearing down the system. And I cannot do that if I have conflicts of interest. And there is an instability that just goes with that, that just naturally goes with that. We live in a house where we have a landlord and we rent, and that landlord could choose to sell the house at any time. And so there's always going to be a sense of possible ungroundedness and possible, lack of safety. We cannot get perfect safety, but the safety that that I crave is one that was really, never there for us. I think that it's an illusion to think that the government can't just take any property that it wants. And, even the idea of private property has tons of problems with it. I would much more vibe with the idea of collective ownership of things, of public lands. And if you want to go all the way back, who owns this land? Who was it taken from? Nobody that I'm related to. And so how do you deal with that? Nobody has good answers. But there's a ton of indigenous wisdom about, how to build community and create community and do herbalism and grow your own food. And so many of those ideals are ideals that are important to me. And I have no idea what my existence here will be. I don't know if I will aid in some kind of revolution or continue to live in just a declining state for the rest of my days. But that's kind of my overall view. And I've been really grateful that my life was destroyed so badly, because it gave me the ability to make a different choice, to design my life after what values were truly important to me. And I will get to live by those values. And I will get to live out my days in leisure rather than working my hands to the bone. And to do that, I've just had to accept some things that maybe other people aren't willing to accept, but I think is a very good life.